So let's get into then a couple of questions. So you can see the one on the screen there. I'm just going to read it for people listening on the podcast, which we record and broadcast afterwards. And Delia says, when I'm overwhelmed, I tend to struggle with prioritizing in the correct order. Can you please advise us on how to improve on this where there are a number of goals with clashing deadlines? Michelle.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many different tools. There's kind of, the SWOT analysis and the Covey's matrix and so on. There's so many different ways of prioritizing your goals. But you've got to figure out what works for you. So I think for you need to make sure that you are prioritizing the goals that are really most meaningful to you, because those are the things that you should actually be spending time on and focusing your attention on. And then things that are less meaningful, think about, how much energy it's going to take to actually focus on those things, and make sure that you are doing those things at a time when you're energetically, you don't need that sort of a little extra push or motivation, because it's boring or it doesn't. So do it when you most perhaps got the most energy and you're not tired and overwhelmed. And then there's certain things, honestly, that can be put into the parking lot. It might be somebody else's priority, and you'll need to communicate, your boundaries and what you're capable of providing for them. But sometimes it's not actually a priority. It's something that can be parked and attended to at a later stage. Where you've classified everything as a priority, I think that's where the problem comes in, right? And Delia, I think maybe that's where you're leading to. So perhaps looking at, all of your activities that you need to get involved in and the goals that you need to achieve, and just saying, okay, what if this is really meaningful? What's important? What's urgent? What if this can actually be parked? And what if this is someone else's priority, actually? It can either be delegated, or it can be, it's something that you need to communicate with the other person, that actually this is not your priority, it's their priority.
Michelle, just on this idea of prioritizing in your life, do you want to start introducing one of the important principles that you talk about in the course, which I learned about through you and have found incredibly helpful, which is this wheel of life, effectively, that gives you a bit of a framework to think about the important things in many aspects of your life, and not just those ones that tend to dominate because of the external demands that you talk about, but from the inside of you with this wheel of life, helping you to visualize then, as Andile has asked about, which are the ones we should prioritize, almost from a slightly selfish perspective, but then with a proper methodology to work on them and achieve them.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. So one of the tools that I use from the get-go with my coaching clients is something called the Wheel of Life. And essentially what it is, it's a wheel with spokes. And each of the spokes represents a key area in your life that is like a priority as such. You can also think of it as a pizza. So it's got slices like a pizza, and each slice of the pizza is an area of your life. So what I would normally do with a client is I would ask them to divide their wheel up into segments. So usually it's about 8 segments, and then label each of the areas of their life that is important to them. So these are things that you are give most focus to, the things that are most important to you. So for most people, that will be things like family, their work, their studies, finances, perhaps their health, their spirituality, things like personal development or education. So there's various different things that somebody would have that is a goal, a kind of a priority for them. And so then you would have each of your segments have a label. And then the way to understand where you are now and where you'd like to be on each of these areas is if you imagine the center of your wheel as a 0 and the outside edge of your wheel to be a 10. For each of these areas, you would first go about saying, okay, for each segment, let's say you have a segment called family. On the scale of 0 to 10, where would I really like to be? So perhaps I'd like to be at an 8. Okay. Now, what that means is in terms of happiness and fulfillment in this area, rather than that time I'm spending in the area, I think that's where people always get it a bit wrong. I want to be an 8. Okay. So from the scale of 1 to 10, I want to be an 8. Then you go about saying, okay, so what does an 8 look like? Okay, so when I'm doing an 8 on family, I am seeing my family regularly. I'm able to interact fluidly with them. There's no fighting. We spend time with each other in a way that is fulfilling to everybody involved. I'm able to look after my family, etc. Okay, so it's like you're trying to get a sense of where you'd really like to see it go. The next thing you would do then is to say, okay, for each of these areas, let me do the same thing. So you can see there in the picture, each of those areas have been highlighted as, where do I want to be? Sorry, Peter, I think this might be where I am now, hey? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think maybe just for context, everyone, I'm sharing a couple of your lessons from the course, just to give people a bit of a visual anchor about what Michelle is talking about this afternoon. And in the course and in those lessons, Michelle will actually take you as a student through a much more comprehensive, explanation of this process. And what you'll actually see is that Michelle coached me through a goal in my hobbies and interests, pizza slice, if you like, where I described where I am now and where I want to get to and what an 8 looks like for me. So, Michelle, I guess just, back to you to wrap up on the sort of wheel of life, and then let's answer a couple of specific questions from the audience. But the wheel of life, just to respond to Andile, really creates that context and that landscape for you within which you can prioritize goals and then start thinking about what you want to do with them. And then in the rest of the course, you sort of take people through a process of actually working towards those goals in a very disciplined way that gives them a high chance of actually achieving them. So really, we talk about goal setting, which is the wheel of life, and then goal achievement, which we'll talk about just now. But last thoughts from you on the wheel of life as an approach to goal setting.
Yeah, so I think, Peter, just for echo what you're saying, it is a structured way of seeing where you actually are at the moment and where you want to be, and then allows you an opportunity to say, okay, you know what, I thought everything was a priority, but this area is actually a little bit more important to me. And just to mention also, remember that when you change one thing in a system, everything changes. It has a knock-on effect. So perhaps you're working on one little wedge in your wheel of life, because that has highlighted itself as the main priority. But it actually has knock-on effects to other areas in your life as well. And hopefully those are positive knock-on effects.
Great, Michelle. And what I've just done is to provide everybody with a free enrollment to our newly launched course. So you can click on that link in the chat there. I think that actually runs out in the next few hours. So you'll need to take action straight off this webinar. But once you enroll in that, you'll have lifetime access to the course, and you'll be able to get all of the things that Michelle is talking about. And she actually gives you an assignment in the course to set some goals. So by the time you finish the course, you'll have actually worked on your goals and started to make progress towards them. Wanted to just pick up on a couple of comments here. So Richard, great to see you. And he made the comments there, what does not get measured does not get done. And I think measurement, comes through in the course and in Michelle's coaching as a very important aspect. But again, you need to have the right goals. There's no point measuring the wrong goals. So starting with this wheel of life, is incredibly powerful for doing that. And then Adelia does respond there to what Michelle was saying. Thank you so much. This makes sense to me personally. I do spread myself too thin out of fear of saying no to others. And Adelia, I'm actually absolutely the same. I like affirmation and I want to please people, but then sometimes I try and please too many people. And often it's the things that you say no to are just as important as the things that you say yes to, because you need to get control of your diary. You need to get control of the amount of energy that you have, and the resources that you can spend on the different goals.